The Existence and Attributes of God by Stephen Charnock. On Spiritual Worship, Part 3. Fourthly, upon these accounts, therefore, God never testified himself well pleased with that kind of worship. He was not displeased with them, as they were his own institution, and ordained for the representing, though in an obscure manner, the glorious things of the gospel. Nor was he offended with those people's observance of them, for, since he had commanded them, it was their duty to perform them, and their sin to neglect them. But he was displeased with them as they were practiced by them, with souls as morally carnal in the practices as the ceremonies were materially carnal in their substance. It was not their disobedience to observe them, but it was a disobedience and a contempt of the end of the institution to rest upon them, to be warm in them, and cold in morals. They fed upon the bone and neglected the marrow, pleased themselves with the shell, and sought not for the kernel. They joined not with them the internal worship of God, fear of him, with faith in the promised seed, which lay veiled under those coverings. Hosea 6 verse 6. I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. And therefore he seems sometimes weary of his own institutions, and calls them not his own, but their sacrifices, their feasts. Isaiah 1 verse 11 and 14. They were his by appointment, theirs by abuse. The institution was from his goodness and condescension, therefore his. The corruption of them was from the vice of their nature, therefore theirs. He often blamed them for their carnality in them, showed his dislike of placing all their religion in them, gives the sacrificers, on that account, no better a title than that of the princes of Sodom and Gomorrah, and compares the sacrifices themselves to the cutting off a dog's neck, swine's blood, and the murder of a man. And indeed, God never valued them, or expressed any delight in them. He despised the feasts of the wicked, Amos 5 verse 21, and had no esteem for the material offerings of the godly, Psalm 50 verse 13. Will I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? Which he speaks to his saints and people, before he comes to reprove the wicked, which he begins, verse 16. But to the wicked God said, etc. So slightly he esteems them, that he seems to disown them to be any part of his command, when he brought his people out of the land of Egypt, Jeremiah 7 verse 21. I spake not to your fathers, nor commanded them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. He did not value and regard them in comparison with that inward frame which he had required by the moral law. That being given from the law of ceremonies obliged them, in the first place, to an observance of those precepts. They seemed to be below the nature of God, and could not of themselves please him. None could in reason persuade themselves that the death of a beast was a proportionable offering for the sin of a man, or ever was intended for the expiation of transgression. In the same rank are all our bodily services under the gospel, a loud voice without spirit, banded bulrushes without inward affections, are no more delightful to God than the sacrifices of animals. It is but a change of one brute for another, of a higher species, a mere brute for that part of man which hath an agreement with brutes. Such a service is a mere animal service, and not spiritual.